Well, the last time around I got the rocker assembly done on the left side, and in the meantime I completed the one on the right side. So the 8-passenger is almost ready to go. There needs to be a brace that goes from the rocker up to the floorboards, but I'm going to do that after I put the side panel on because I need to elevate this whole thing up a little bit more. So now I'd like to get my 11 up here, and we kind of need to do kind of a do-si-do. I'd like to have the 11 up here closer to my bench, quasi table saw, because that's where I have all my tools and they're a little more accessible. So if I can kind of squeak these side by side, maybe I can get them to fit. Never seem to have quite enough room, huh? I guess it doesn't really matter which side I do first. Yeah, I think that'll work. So I had been kind of playing with this right side a little bit, kind of getting it in to where I think it's going to be pretty close. The biggest difference with this is all my holes are pre-drilled, so it'll be the same, but yet it's going to be a little different. These inside irons have already been pre-drilled, so I have to work with the position that those holes are already in. And to get good access to that, I think I'm going to take this back seat out of the way. It's kind of in the way when I'm trying to work on those irons. So when I was working with these heavy inside irons on that 8-passenger, I was making sure that I didn't interfere with this big screw that I had stuck in. And I had thought I'd tried to place them where they were originally on the old ones. But this one here, let me draw where this hole needs to be. Looks like I'm just going to take off the corner of that head. I'm going to miss the main body of the screw, but that's kind of where it is, unless I weld this shut and actually move it out of the way just a little bit. But then I'd have to move the holes on this iron here that have to correlate with these, so I think it's just going to have to be what it is. Maybe this screw should have been 1/4 of an inch over. So that's something I have to deal with. This is on the right side. On the left side, here's my screw here, and as I move this straight over, my screw is actually right here, so I'm clearing that one pretty comfortably. That one's going to be okay. So that's going to be the biggest difference on this 11, using original irons that already have the holes in them. I have to make those holes work unless I weld and move the holes, but I'd rather not do that. They did it once, hopefully I can do it again. The most complicated set of holes to line up is going to be on this rear corner. It has all these irons that need to blend together, and all these holes need to line up. So this outside curve here needs to match the holes there, and then this outside rocker, all these 3 bolt patterns have to line up. hopefully we can get her done. I have a little bit of reshaping to do here. I'm away from my frame and I'm touching here, so I need to relax this just a little bit. And I'll make some 3/8 shims in here that'll simulate my body panel, just like I did on that 8-passenger. So that's gonna fit pretty nice there. So this hole on the end here and this hole of the heavy iron is actually the two that relate to each other. These two other holes here and on the heavy iron correspond to these two holes on this rocker post here. So I think if I shove this in here and bring this shoulder all the way up to where it needs to be, I can line this hole and that should put us in position with all these other holes, in theory anyway. So I'm up against this framework here, and I'm up against the toe of my frame for the rear curve. So this is the inside edge of this vertical for my main frame. So I go from there to this hole. Looks like I'm right at 1.5 inches. So if I check this outside iron, it's 3 inches. And if I put this edge right up against my vertical frame, I'm also right at 1.5 inches. So these should correlate if I put this right up tight against that frame inside. And I want to run straight across from these two faces here. It's a little bit of a curve, but if I run that bolt straight, then that hole should correlate about that position there. I'm going to get this out of the way for the time being. So, just check my other holes. Make sure we're kind of opposite each other. There and there. There. Maybe there and there. Next one up is there. That's not bad. That one seems to be off. This hole down here, I'd say it should be about here instead of up here if I was going to come straight across. If I did it here, that bolt would have to be at a pretty good angle. If I was going to go straight across from this hole up here, I would put this hole about right there instead of here. I may plug that hole and put a hole in this position instead. All the rest seem to line up pretty well. I'll put my shim in there just to make sure that it's where it's going to be. That brings that up. It's actually going to make that a little bit worse. Now, if I were to come straight across from the hole inside, that hole should be down here. That's almost 3/4 inch off. I think I'm going to weld that shut and adjust that hole. The rest I think I can make work. You know, in trying to line up these holes, I can look at the side and see kind of the direction that hole needs to be, but I don't know where they need to be this direction. So I've been taking a square and coming up to wherever it touches, and then from the face of this square to the hole on the top and to the hole on the bottom, I've been able to kind of compare my measurements and see if they are actually straight this direction. They're coming out pretty close, within about a 1/16 of an inch. So I think I'm going to take a 5/16 bit initially and try to find the direct line for these holes, and then I'll take my 3/8 that they need to be for these 3/8 bolts and actually clean that hole up. So far we've been pretty close when I do this kind of a measurement. I welded this hole shut, so this one I can actually just drill like I did on that 8-passenger. But I'm trying to get the alignment this way, and this seems to work pretty well. So these 3 holes here line up with these 3 holes, and if I place them on top of each other, they seem to be right there in line, which makes sense. That's where they came off of initially. So I just have to match these with the heavy iron on top. Well, these 2 are pretty easy, but this one has to go right in the middle of this little bend. So I've actually got to heat this head up red hot and set it in and conform it as I set it down in there. It's got to have kind of a twisted head to fit this slope. Should work the same with these 2. They're going to correlate with the 2 holes in this stand, but there's 2 holes in this outside iron, and they should all line up also. Well, I put this front rocker post in the position that it was on the old original framework. And I mounted up the rocker. And this is one of those times that if nobody was around and I wasn't on YouTube, I would just fix and nobody would know. But part of this whole YouTube deal is, in my own mind, I was willing to say, I'll show you whatever I do. I ran into something I got to fix. On this old framework, this is where the curve to the driver's box starts to go. And you can see the imprint of this post that the rocker mounts to. And this is the imprint of the lower iron as it comes up and fastens. So just about 1/4 of an inch back from this joint where that curve goes is where that leading edge sets on this rocker mount, and the rear sets back here. So I show you that to show you this, that I've tried to put this in that same position. So 1/4 of an inch forward from this joint is where this post for this rocker is mounted. And this rear iron on the inside of the curve has to set in this position. So you've just seen all the alignment that I've had to use. These 3 holes for the lower curve of the rocker iron, these 2 holes for the location of the mount for the rear rocker mount. So those are givens. So this front lower iron to this rocker is going to set with this wood coming into this corner, and it's going to set right about in here. And I can play with that and fine tune it a little bit. But that basically is the location of this front rocker iron. So when I determined the length of this rocker, remember just the ends were there, but the irons were still mounted onto that original frame. So I went from the corner of the end of the rocker where it hits the iron on both ends, and I got my overall length. So now I have that one in position, judging from where the old wood is, and I have this in position. When I come back to this iron that is already bolted in place, you can see the end of this wood doesn't come into this corner here. So there's a couple ways to approach this. I could straighten this bend out and actually move it to this point here and adjust these bends and make that work. And everything would work pretty well, except my hole is right here. If I straighten this out, it would move this hole down a little bit, but I would prefer if this hole was a little further. You know, I'm about 1.5 inches that I've put all my other ones on. But that's an option. Or I could cut this and lengthen it and bring this down into that position, and I'd have to adjust these bends a little bit as well, but actually lengthen this just a hair, and then this hole is going to be about that 1.5 inch length from this bend like it was on the original ones. It would just shift this down in the curve the same as if this wood was shifted up into this bend. So I could sit here and fret and stew on why it's not just perfect like it was when it came off the original one. Or I can just fix it and it'll be just like the original one. And that's what I'm going to do. I'm actually going to just lengthen this out. So this is where I have it adjusted. I have my angles adjusted. I'm going to come in and add about 1.25 inches in length. This post height here is the same. Why this has changed, I don't know. I'm not going to worry about it, but I'll add that space in it and everything is going to match up, and my hole is going to be right back here where the other ones are. So with just a little adjustment, that's how it's supposed to look like, coming right into that corner. So from here on out, the rest of it should be the same, but when these irons are already pre-drilled and we have 1, 2, 3, 4 irons that all have to interlock, it's a little bit more of a challenge to get all these holes lined up. And what shifted and what changed in all this? I don't know, but that's the challenge and the difference between restorations and new construction. That 8-passenger was actually pretty simple because I put holes where I wanted them to be. This, I had to make them fit where they used to be, and evidently I have something a little different in my woodwork that threw a little bit of this off. But I'll go ahead and finish the rest of this rocker and probably do the right side as well, and I won't bother you with all those details. You kind of understand the process. Appreciate you coming along. Thanks for watching.